The question, when did Rome fall, calls for a very complicated answer. This is because there was no definite ending point for the Roman Empire. One could say Rome fell when the Western Rome disintegrated, or when the last Roman Empire Romulus was killed. Because there's no definite answer to when did Rome fall, it's best to ask, why did it fall? The fall of Rome began with the Pax Romana. The Pax Romana was a time of peace and contentment, beginning with the accession of Augustus in 27 BC and ending in 180 AD due to the death of Marcus Aurelius. The Pax Romana is normally thought to be a time of prosperity for the people of Rome. The decline of imperialism led to a relatively stable, unified empire. Throughout the Pax Romana, there was more political stability than other time periods of Rome. Emperors died of natural causes instead of getting assassinated, causing smoother power transitions between emperors. Merchants settled in large marketplaces to sell goods, and around them developed large cities and easy trading. All these factors led to a relatively peaceful time period.
The time of peace and well-being that was the Pax Romana came to an end during the 3rd century. This decline from prosperity is known as the 3rd century crisis. The 3rd century crisis came about as a result of many problems within the Roman Empire. These problems included economic and military problems, in addition to the growing external pressure caused by Germanic tribes. Much of the economic problems of the end of the Pax Romana that led to the 3rd century crisis arose from the lack of expansion and new acquisitions for the empire. This lack of expansion meant fewer of the slaves that drove the Roman economy, in addition to fewer pillaged resources and less access to natural resources. Additionally, large plagues hit Rome, killing large chunks of the population. This contributed to the weakening economy and depopulation. While there was a smaller army during the Pax Romana, what army there was controlled by a few powerful generals with loyal followers. This army had dangerous powers and the ability to turn on the emperor. In addition to all of these internal problems, there are external threats of Germanic tribes. All of these various problems culminated in the 3rd century crisis. A combination of soldiers revolting and Germanic tribe attacks laid waste to the empire. Economic problems contributed to the willingness of soldiers to revolt, and a vicious cycle of economic problems and various wars looked like they were going to tear the empire apart.
However, this eventuality did not come to be because of one man. This man was named Diocletian. Diocletian came to throne in 284 AD. He set reforms in order to stabilize the empire. However, these reforms only temporarily stabilized the empire and were not permanent solutions to the empire's problems. One kind of reform that he created were administrative reforms. He reorganized the administration into more manageable provinces. The Roman Empire was split up into 2 halves, with one Augustus, a leader in the west with the Caesar, the leader's assistant, to help him, and one Augustus in the east with another Caesar to help him. These reforms brought problems such that separate pairs of leaders saw each other as rivals and not allies, because all authority figures began fighting for complete control. This developed into civil wars, which was another factor of the weakening of the Western Roman Empire. Another type of reform was Diocletian's military reforms. He first separated the military from civil power. He also enlarged the army by recruiting Germanic tribesmen, specially named foederati. As a part of the army, these foederati were, with few exceptions, loyal to Rome and served well, with the reward of food, money, and eventually were housed by local landowners, being able to live in Rome itself. However, the army began to have a shortage of Roman-centered trained manpower. The process of decline in the army made it impossible to reverse trends of the military, which were discipline, training, and original fighting methods that disappeared as soldiers disappeared. The lack of trained men to hand down traditions, along with the lack of active training for new soldiers, led to the downward spiral of the Western Roman army. Diocletian's reforms left a legacy in which the rest of the Roman Empire follows through with. The empire resumes to rely on the help of Germanic tribesmen. Diocletian's splitting of Rome into 2 halves has fundamentally changed the rest of Roman history. In the end, Diocletian did in fact keep Rome surviving, even if it was for only a much shorter time than he had wished for.
Rome was facing a lot of internal problems which significantly weakened them and then set up the western half of falling apart. During the Pax Romana, Rome stopped conquering other areas, and then this caused a problem later on. Rome's entire structure and working was based on having a ton of slaves to do all the work. When Rome stopped conquering, the amount of incoming slaves greatly decreased, hurting Rome's economy. Along with less slaves, Rome was facing an all-around working force becoming smaller, which was an issue. This came with a problem of depopulation that was especially prominent in the big cities. Big plagues swept Rome's cities, killing many people. This decrease in the working force greatly affected agricultural production, and Rome faced a problem of having enough food to feed their huge population. With agriculture facing its issues, a lot of small farmers decided to give up their farms and go join large farms, where they would rent a part of the land. This was good for them because it gave them sufficient food to feed them and their families, but the amount of food that is left for the rest of the empire starts to dwindle. With these large farms, big villas were constructed where the owners could enjoy a lavish lifestyle. This also proved a way for small farmers to evade taxes, which in turn hurt the economy of the Roman Empire. The separation of the east and west halves of the empire then led to decreased economic trade, eventually hurting the western half more. Because of these economic issues, the military suffered as well. Along with the overall problem of depopulation in the working force, the military suffered a lot. The number of people signing up to be in the military declined, and therefore the power of the military to fend off attacks declined.
One of the main reasons for the Roman Empire's collapse was external pressure. The external pressure came from the Germanic tribes, also referred to as barbarians in crude terms. These tribes would be stationed near Rome's borders and even more closer and populated at the western half. They simply wanted to infiltrate the empire, wanting just more power within. Originally, the tribesmen did not want to tear down and destroy the Roman Empire. Moreover, the barbarians also desired for Roman rights and the benefits that some of the Romans had. Altogether, the tribesmen were less powerful than the Romans, but the Romans made a lot of crucial mistakes. How did 10,000 men overtake a whole empire? For example, the army sometimes gave up and let the barbarians in without defending them. Soon, the tribesmen would acquire great amounts of land from the mistakes that the Romans made. As soon as one part of Rome got sacked, starting with the Visigoths in 410 AD, the barbarians kept sacking Rome. Their second sack came in 455 AD against the Vandals. Finally, the third sack was with Odoacer in 476 AD. These were the three sacks of Rome. Eventually, this led to a cycle of anarchy and wrecking the economy of the western half of Rome. As a result, the empire in the west collapses. The decline of Rome's western empire compares to the decline of other empires such as Persia and the Han, as in all of the empire's internal problems were the first stage of destruction, which then led to it becoming vulnerable to invading armies. All empires experienced economic issues which often came in the form of taxes, as the government would raise them and the people wouldn't have money to pay them, which then resulted in the failing economy of many empires.